Welcome back to the Place We Find Ourselves podcast. I'm Adam Young, and this is the first episode of Season 5. Last year, John Eldredge wrote a book called Get Your Life Back. And in today's episode, John and I talk about my favorite parts of his book. In short, we talk about simple, everyday practices that will help you get your life back. Now, why is this important? Because the pace of modern Western life, even in the midst of COVID, often borders on madness. It doesn't feel like madness for many of us because we've lived life at this pace for so long. The pace just feels normal. But the human heart was not designed to operate at 5,000 RPMs all the time. It wasn't designed to carry the weight that many of us carry. Enjoy my conversation with John. Okay, I'm here with John Eldredge. John, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks, Adam. Good to talk with you today.
We're going to focus our conversation on a book that you recently wrote called Get Your Life Back. But before we do that, since this podcast is about story, trauma, therapy, why don't you share a little bit about how did you personally get interested in story and in your story in particular?
I think I've always been intrigued about the life of the heart, but for me, it was early 30s, young dad, young kids, and I started blowing up at them. Like I had this anger thing come out, literally spilled milk at the table, just small, nothing stuff. And there would just be this rage. And I could manage my way of doing life in my 20s because I wasn't really affecting other people that directly. But when it was my children and I'm watching, I'm doing harm. And it was devastating to me. And that's when I went, holy smokes. I knew that I had a broken heart from growing up in an alcoholic home. I knew that I had significant rage at my father, but I just never gone in there. I hadn't dealt with it. And so I went and saw a beautiful counselor, and that began the journey of healing and caring about my own story, caring about other people's stories. And actually it was having had that beautiful experience of being a client that caused me to go to grad school and get my degree in counseling and really begin to focus on healing other people as well as me.
And was it worth it engaging your story? Has it been worth it for you?
So confession, I'm doing an intensive next week personally. That's how worth it is.
Yeah.
Yeah, come on. If we pay attention to our stories, we can heal. And if we heal, we are so much stronger to live in an hour where the world has gone crazy.
And some of that craziness is why you wrote the book, yes?
Oh yeah, this recent, right? Which is a wild story because I wrote it before the pandemic.
Right.
I wrote it before the real crazy hit.
And the book, it's Get Your Life Back is the name of the book. It's conversational, it's personal. You share a fair bit about your own life. But in my opinion, the book is prophetic because it simultaneously names the madness of some of our contemporary Western culture and invites us into a different kind of living. And so let's begin by talking about, why did you write this book in the first place? What were you observing in your own life and the lives of your friends that prompted you to write this book?
Let's remember, this is all prior to 2020. Okay. So before the crazy, the world was crazy. But what I was seeing, Adam, in my own soul was a weariness, a shallowness. I felt like I was living on fumes, and I began to notice patterns. But the one that I really hated, sort of the shocker for me, was I've got grandchildren now, little tiny ones, and they're just adorable. A little 2-year-old boy, a little 3-year-old girl, and I was playing with them in the living room, and I noticed I could not be present to them for more than about 3 minutes without checking my phone. And I'm like, dude, you are seriously jacked. And I am a very monastic person. So I just knew. I'm like, hey, whoa, if it reached me, it's reached everybody.
And in the introduction to the book, you asked some really simple questions. You ask, how often do you feel lighthearted? Do you feel deeply loved? When was the last time you felt carefree? And when I read the introduction, when I read the questions, I'm answering them in my own mind. How often do I feel lighthearted? Not very often. I mean, lightheartedness is not a word that I would use to characterize my life. And yet, your contention is it's actually a rather important word for Christians. And we'll get to that in a moment. But your second question, do you feel deeply loved? Sometimes, but not as often as I crave. And when was the last time I felt carefree? There have been moments, but they've been few and short. And so why is feeling lighthearted and carefree important if you're a Christian? Why does this matter?
Well, we could just speak to anyone's humanity. The human condition, we are so built for joy. We are so built for happiness. We're built not to carry the sorrows of the world. And then you add, if you dial into a life in God who offers to carry your burdens and to love you fiercely and to fight for your healing and restoration, if you hook your life up, Jesus says, my yoke is easy, my burden is light. Peter echoes it later when he says, cast everything on God, everything, because he cares for you. And I'll be honest, I used to hate those verses.
Right.
I'm like, that's not true. I don't want to get graphic on the podcast, so I'll say that's nonsense. But what are you talking about? I don't know anybody whose life is yoke is easy and their burden is light. What? Like, and so, but I was intrigued enough to know, I think there's truth here. I think he's describing a reality available to us. And there's a fun story with this. So another part of my spiritual journey over the years has been learning to hear the voice of God. And so I would come to God. This is prior to writing the book. So now we're back into like 2017, 2018. I would come to Jesus in a time of prayer. And I'd be praying maybe for my grandkids, or I'd be praying for, an upcoming meeting or something. And I swear to you, for about 6 months, the first thing he would say to me is, give everyone and everything to me. And I'm like, oh yeah, thank you. Yep, that's awesome. Yes, that is so good. Okay. All right. So anyway, what I was talking about was the meeting that I'm going into, and he would just repeat it. He'd be like, John, give everyone and everything to me. And what I realized was I carry far more than I know. And that's when I started doing this little poll. I asked, I started asking the people those questions and just saying, hey, when's the last time you felt lighthearted? Is carefree, part of your palette? Do you get there very often? And just kind of taking people's temperatures on that and going, we are all heavy laden. If I could just run on a rabbit trail for a second. So there was a British anthropologist, Robin Dunbar, who wrote a book. And he did two things. He was looking at the size of the cerebral cortex, the human brain, and he was researching the average size of human villages down through the centuries. And he said, we are made for a community of about 150 people. I'm like, what? Like, no, I know what's happening with the farmers right now in India and the government crackdown. I can tell you about the riots in Tunisia. I'm aware of the body count in the UK. I have friends under new quarantines in Switzerland, right? Like, we have way too much news, way too much information. And so back to the lighthearted and carefree. I don't think most people realize you're just not supposed to live as dialed in as you are.
And so you developed something called the 1 minute pause, which became the first chapter of this book. And it's an app. But tell us about it, this thing called the 1 minute pause. How did you personally come to begin practicing it in the first place?
So, pull in the driveway at the end of the day, turn my engine off in my truck, and realize I am spent. But I'm more than spent. I'm still plugged in. I'm rehearsing emails that I haven't answered. I'm still in meetings that clients I was seeing. So I would just literally lay my head down on my steering wheel and I would just pause. And this seems so simple. But what I realized was I never do this. I just go. I go from phone call to meeting to client to this to that and I don't pause. There's no space in my day. There's no stillness. If I do pause, we all have a knee-jerk reaction.
Right.
We pick up our phones. And you just watch people. Watch people when they are in line anywhere. We don't even know what to do with a pause anymore. We immediately reach for our phones and we're plugged back in, right? To the matrix. So I began to pause. I started making a practice of, I need to do this a couple times a day. So I would set my phone alarm for 10 and 2. So 10 and 2 every day. And then the fun thing is here in our building, we have a staff here of about 15 people. In our building, monastery bells go off at 10 and 2 every day because I'm like, staff, you got to check this out. This is super helpful. Like just pause and let it go. And then there was that I was combining what Jesus had invited me to do, which was give everyone and everything to me. And it is astounding how addicted we are to movement and to stimulation and to that convincing people to take a 60-second pause in their day. You sound like a nut job.
And so what is it? Like, just take us through the 1 minute pause. What do you do for 60 seconds, John?
Yeah. Okay. So this is really fun. So again, this is all pre-quarantines. We released this app. I'm like, you know what? This is super helpful. I think this will be helpful to people. We put a free app out there on the App Store called the 1 minute pause. And boom, the quarantines hit last March, a year ago. And we've had people write in and say this app literally saved my life. There are 3 stages to it. First, some breathing, just take a few deep breaths, slow down. And then the invitation, the first step is, Jesus, I give everyone and everything to you. I give everyone and everything to you, God. And you just linger there for a moment. I give everyone and everything to you. And then the second step is heal my union with you. I'm created for union with God. Heal my union with you. Because all of this crazy we've been describing, the pace of life, the amount of news and information, how plugged in we are to technology, erodes our union with God. And then the third part is fill me. Fill me. Saturate me with your love. Saturate me with your life. And that simple realignment a couple times a day is wonderful. It's just so healing.
Mm-hmm. And neurobiologically, we know that practices like this change the brain.
Yeah.
No practice, no rewiring in the brain. But if you do practices on a regular basis, it doesn't only affect 10 a.m. and 2 p.m., it affects the way you are in between.
Yes. And can we all just thank God for the plasticity of the brain for a minute? Back in the 80s, they thought the brain was a fixed system and you're stuck because your brain is now hardwired to that, but it's not. And it's beautifully malleable and therefore healable, restorable, renewable. And yeah, it's awesome.
It's awesome. It's awesome. And one of the ways, or another practice that you outline in the book, it's in the second chapter, is called benevolent detachment. And it's a practice, and it has been so helpful for me personally. What do you mean by benevolent detachment? What are you inviting people to do?
Yeah. First, I want to hear why. Why has this been helpful, Adam?
Well, it's been helpful to me because I take things on that I don't want to let go of to God, and those begin to weigh me down. And so,
Yeah,
for example, my kids, how can I parent these children well? Like the more they grow, the more I realize that I'm not fathering them well. There's something inside that begins to grasp and claw and hold on to their development, their social and emotional development. And benevolent detachment for me has been about Jesus. I give you my son's heart. I give you the maturation of his heart. I'm not ditching out on my responsibility as a father, but I am giving my son's heart to Jesus's care.
yes. And then let's just go out from there. And I give my community, and I give my country, and I give the global news, and I give human trafficking, and I just all the things that we care about. And so that kind of stuff, it just weighs the soul down. Like you can't carry that. Sometime in your day, at least once in your day, there's got to be a moment where you detach. And I added benevolent to it because it's very important that we understand this isn't cynicism. This isn't anger. This isn't resignation. It's not quitting. And it's not no longer caring. It's saying, I am not God. I am not the savior of the human race, not even the dear people that I love. And I have got to I have got to detach. I've got to let it go. And so benevolent, meaning something done in love. I do this in love. Detachment, meaning this is what Peter invited us to do. Cast everything on God because he cares for you. I turn this over to you right now, God.
You have a chapter called Drinking Beauty, which gets at this need to also kind of renew our hearts, our souls with the beauty. Well, you call it beauty. You call it drinking beauty. And here's your thesis. Here's your thesis for the chapter. You say beauty reassures us that goodness is still real in the world, more real than harm or scarcity or evil. And I love that. But what do you mean by beauty? And how does beauty reassure my heart that goodness is still real in the world?
I'm going to say some words. I'm going to say some things, but listeners, what I really encourage you to do is just go watch 5 minutes of any of the Planet Earth episodes. You know, the famous, gorgeous, rich, beautiful nature series, or any of those. What just ocean waves? Turn on a surfing show and just watch the ocean for 5 minutes, and you'll know immediately because because the soul responds to it. It's fascinating. So people in hospitals recover faster, are released sooner, and need less pain medication if they simply have a window that looks on nature. Like, how cool is that? Like, that is so awesome that we are wired for beauty. You just think about the two different experiences of you drive past a car that was in an accident, and you're not bodies, not people, not anything. You just see something that's been trashed, destroyed, turned over, beat up, and you cringe. Like the body recoils from marring, violence, crushing, breaking, harm. The body just recoils from it. The soul recoils from it. But if you drive by somebody's garden that's in its summer glory, and you're like, whoa, look at the hydrangeas, look at like everything in you, you want to stop, you want to hang out, you want to look at it. Like there's this deep visceral response to beauty. And then what I'm suggesting is if you will linger with it, if you will pause and allow beauty to do its thing, to minister to your soul, it brings with it it's what we're talking about is the goodness of God. It reminds you, oh, that's right. That's who you are. You are good. You are generous. And the other night it was Stacy had the nature show on, and it was on blue whales, and just 3 minutes. I just stopped. I was walking through the room. 3 minutes. I'm watching these whales just surfacing in the ocean. It was like a reset. It's like, oh right, God is good. The world is a fundamentally beautiful place. I'm just worn out from the brokenness. But what I need to be reminded of is the beauty.
Yeah. My family and I moved out here to Colorado 3 years ago because of this, because I couldn't sustain the work I was doing with traumatized people week in and week out without access to beauty. I mean, we were living in Atlanta. I'd need to drive 2 hours basically to get what I can get to in 15 minutes from my house now. And for me, beauty is the jagged mountains. It's the rolling foothills. It's the boulders and rock cliffs. It's seeing deer when I go mountain biking. It's being able to go mountain biking. And it has completely changed my heart. Like, I'm in a habitat that is right for my heart. And it doesn't have to be Colorado for everyone, but you have to find what makes your heart sing. What beautiful forms on this earth make your heart sing, because that will help you get your life back. That's your contention.
It's huge. And it doesn't have to be epic. It's beautiful music. It's flowers in a vase. It's raindrops on your windshield. Like I am ravenous for it now. But I'm going to do something really fun. You didn't know I was going to do this, and I don't know if it's going to play, but we're going to try this here. I'm going to play 5 seconds of this music, and you'll see exactly what we mean here. It works.
And we actually know this neurobiologically. We put people in fMRI machines and we turn on Bach and we watch their right hemisphere dance with color. It's how God has designed our brains. And I mean, the whole time you've been talking about this, John, you've been smiling. The listeners can't see you, but I see you. You're smiling. And there's a chapter in your book called Kindness Toward Ourselves. Kindness towards ourselves. And here's what you write. You say, the practices I'm recommending in this book are offered in a spirit of kindness. Practicing the 1-minute pause is kind. Making room for beauty is kind. Unplugging from media is kind. I do these things because they bring me life. They bring me more of God. They heal my soul. Now, you've been around Christian circles long enough to know that there is often a deep suspiciousness around this idea that we are allowed to be kind to ourselves. So how did you personally begin to kind of open yourself to the invitation to be kind to your own heart?
I saw the damage. There's a very beautiful, simple essay by C.S. Lewis called Two Ways with the Self. Two Ways with the Self. And he describes two different characters in there. He quotes Julian of Norwich, who talks about being kind to ourselves. And then he quotes a Roman general legionnaire from Tacitus. And he said he was more ruthless because he had endured it himself. That was me. I was a survivor. I survived by being a fighter and frankly, by being ruthless on my own soul. And losses, so what? Disappointments, who cares? Press on. And I thought I could get away with that. But now we're back to like why paying attention to the way you treat yourself is so important. The way you treat your own heart is the way you will end up treating everyone else's. And I thought I could get away with that. I thought, no, 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 I'm rough on myself, but I love everybody else. And that's just nonsense. It was the realization that I am doing harm by a lifestyle of severity on my own self. And in that little essay, Two Ways with the Self, C.S. Lewis says, Jesus did say we should love our neighbors as ourselves, which is an awful command if you hate yourself.
The last chapter I want to ask you about is called Caring for Neglected Places in Your Soul. And you have a very simple 3-word sentence in that chapter where you say, your losses matter. Your losses matter. Why are you saying that? And what does it mean for me to begin to act like my losses matter?
So, again, because of the nature of the world we live in, no one is going to tell you this, that your losses matter. For the most part, the world says, get on, get on. There's no space in our world. Here's a fascinating example of this. So, towards the end of the year, we're all making the transition after Christmas towards New Year's, and everybody's thinking towards 2021, and everybody's saying, "No, thank God, 2020 is over." I just want to get out of that year. And they were, even just in my immediate family, just conversation, talking about, hey, what's the new year going to be, and do you have any dreams for the new year? And I couldn't go there. I was stuck. I couldn't dream or even enter into 2021, and I didn't know why until I paused. There's got to be some space. I paused and I realized, because I am so filled with grief from 2020 on a very personal level, as well as on a humanity level. We suffered some very, very disappointing losses personally in 2020, and I had not taken the time to grieve them. And so I honestly could not enter into the new year until I sat down and gave myself a couple hours and just wrote them out. It was just an evening. I'm sitting at home and I realized I just need to write this out. What were my losses this year? From small things like, it was my 60th birthday and Stacy had this huge party planned and we have all our friends over and stuff like that. And then the quarantine hit. And so no party, boom, taken away. Small things, disappointing, but that's not the loss of a child. But then it was on into some very severe relational losses, some real heartbreak, and I needed to write them down and name the loss and grieve it. And then I was actually able to fold the piece of paper in half and symbolically hand it to Jesus. Say, okay, now I can let go of 2020 and I can now turn my face to a new year and move into whatever the new year holds. Your losses matter because your heart matters.
Yeah, and our losses actually matter to Jesus.
Yeah.
Big ones and small ones, they matter. There's a transition in the chapter from sorrow to anger, and you have this lovely sentence where you say that part of my soul care regimen now includes a baseball bat and plastic trash bin. And I laughed out loud when I read that. And then came the sigh of relief. He's saying that I'm allowed to be angry,
Yeah.
like really angry.
Yep.
First of all, I want to make sure our listeners know that you're not speaking metaphorically here. You've got a baseball bat and a trash bin, don't you?
Oh gosh, you guys, those big recycling bins that the city provides, those things that look indestructible because they toss them around on those huge trucks and all that, those things are fabulous. I have broken the lid of ours. Where is the outlet in your life for the injustice, For the rage, the anger, where is the outlet? You can't just go, oh, well. You literally take it into your body and it turns into fear, which is a really weird thing. But unexpressed anger turns into fear and anxiety. So, yeah, this is part of my healthy life is go out with a baseball bat on a regular basis and just go ham on the trash can.
And here's what you write. You say we must do something with our rage. And let me add, of course you're angry. Your rage is not a sign that something's wrong with you. There's something wrong with the world. We're often embarrassed by our anger, but it's simply proof that our hearts are aching for things to be right. This is so important for people, especially people with trauma, John, to hear, because very few of us have had our rage blessed by those in positions of spiritual authority. Very few of us have had our rage blessed by our parents. You're saying, look, of course you're angry.
Yes.
Like, it's good that you're angry. That means you're paying attention.
You are a human being. You are a human being, and things are really wrong.
Yeah. How did you come to bless your own rage rather than feeling guilty about it?
I have an interesting story in that I had no religious experiences in my life until I was 19 years old. I was raised in what would have been a very typical agnostic American home. And so I don't carry the baggage, the religious baggage that many of my friends and the dear people I work with, my dear wife, who is raised Catholic, and still has a great fondness for her upbringing in the Catholic Church. By the way, that's not a dig. It's just to say I didn't have that. So I didn't have the your age is wrong thing. I just needed to like find a healthy place for it. And if the trash can thing seems too much, honestly, try this game. You have kitchen utensils. You probably have a spatula. You have a cushion on your sofa. Close the door and vent your rage with a spatula on the sofa. And you will be amazed, like your body will feel better in about 20 seconds.
I want to end by asking you about something from a different book that you wrote called Walking with God. And I want to end with it because it's a story that had the biggest effect on me of all of your writing. You tell a story about an older woman saying something to you about the battle in your life. Do you remember the story, John?
Vaguely, take me back.
A woman comes up to you. You describe her as a saint, and she says to you, "The battle in your life is against your joy."
Yes.
And no single sentence of your writing has impacted me as much as that sentence. What has her prophetic words to you meant to you? And how might it?
No. You got to tell us why. You just threw this huge statement out there. Nothing has affected you more than that. Like, why?
Well, it affects me because I can relate to it. The notion that my life can be about joy is a relatively novel notion to me when I first read this book about 5 years ago. That God actually wants me to experience lightheartedness, carefreeness, joy. Those were new concepts. Now, I've read the Gospel of John. I know that the entire trajectory of the middle of the Gospel of John is that Jesus is saying, this is so that your joy might be complete. Remain in me so that your joy, I know that. But I didn't know it until I read this story of this woman coming up to you and saying that the battle in your life is against your joy.
Yes. And the problem was, I was still in alignment with severe asceticism, with a severity on my life. And so my thing was, suck it up. Suck it up, man. Get on. And what she was pointing out was, you are very vulnerable now in your impoverishment. you are starved. You are in a joy famine, and therefore you're very vulnerable to addictions, affairs, to blowing your life up, looking for a little something that's going to fill that terrible famine. And it was an epiphany because as soon as she said it, I saw it. I'm like, oh yeah, no, that's true. Yeah, yeah. Everything I want to do that brings joy usually gets stolen. So why bother? Is the sentence that enters in. So why bother? Just suck it up and carry on. And I saw the famine. I saw the setup by the enemy. I'm like, oh man, like, come on, the guy that wrote Wild at Heart. Like, if we can get that guy publicly in an affair, the enemy would love to do that. I saw it. I just saw the whole thing for what it was. And I'm like, whoa, I have got to take happiness much more seriously in my life than I do. And arrange for, plan into my calendar joy.
Yeah. Dan Allender says that trauma can actually open the heart to joy. And what I would say is that just the trajectory of my life is moving towards increasing levels of joy. You're holding your arms up. How that is possible given the trauma, I don't know. That's just what God does. He's about reversals.
Yes. Well, your soul, you have enlarged your capacity of your soul through suffering. So now your soul has a larger capacity for joy.
Part of the book, Get Your Life Back, that was so meaningful to me is you're inviting us, you're daring me to embrace lightheartedness, carefreeness, joy, and you even use the word as a discipline.
Yes, as an act of love and as an act of enormous wisdom in this hour. Because right now, the world will crush you if you don't take this seriously. The care of your soul, benevolent detachment, beauty.
Well, John, it has been a delight to have you on the podcast. Thank you for taking the time. If people want to hear more from you, they can listen to your podcast, which I believe is now called Wild at Heart, correct?
The Wild at Heart podcast. Yep.
Your words have been so meaningful to me, your audio recordings. People can go to your website and get those if they want. What's the website, John?
Yeah, wildatheart.org.
Wildatheart.org. Thank you, John.
Yeah, Adam, great chatting with you. Loved it.
Thank you for listening. If you want to get episodes as soon as they are released, you need to download the Place We Find Ourselves app from the App Store, and then you need to pay $3 a month or $30 per year to subscribe. You can do that from my website. Have a great couple of weeks, everybody.